Good evening. This is Tuesday, January 9th, 2024, meeting of the Town of Berlin Planning Board. As a preliminary matter, please note this meeting is being recorded and some of the attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks will be able to see you. The ugly band t-shirt you decided to wear tonight, or anything you intend to or not screen share on your computer. Anything that you broadcast will be captured and recorded forever and ever, and will possibly wind up as a TikTok video to be shared amongst your neighbors and friends. This is Tom Sanford, Chair of the Planning Board. Permit me to confirm that the members of the Planning Board are present and can hear me prior to me calling the meeting to order. Planning Board members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jay Teach.
Here.
Timothy Wheeler.
Here.
Carolyn McDonald.
Here.
Thomas Andrew.
Here.
Thank you. With a quorum of the board present, I call this meeting to order at 7:35 p.m. Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. This is an open meeting of the planning board being conducted remotely, consistent with the Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. Specific information and general guidelines for the remote participation by members of the public can be found on the Town of Berlin website. The governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location and allows and encourages us to participate remotely. For this meeting, the planning board is convening using the Zoom platform as posted on the agenda, which includes links for the public to join this meeting. I'll introduce each speaker on the agenda. After their concluding remarks, I will invite each board member by name to provide any comments, questions, penetrating insights, and/or motions. Please hold all your insights until your name is called. Board members, please remember to mute your telephone or computer when you're not speaking. Speak clearly to ensure accurate minutes are recorded. For any response, please wait until you're yielded the floor. State your name before speaking. If board members wish to engage in conversation with one another, please do so through me to avoid multiple conversations happening at the same time. Lastly, please note that each vote in this meeting will be recorded by a roll call vote. Thank you all for your understanding and cooperation. At this time, I will take a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of last meeting. Any discussion? Any objections? If not, I'll ask you to vote. Carolyn McDonald.
Aye.
Jay Teach.
Aye.
Thomas Andrew.
Aye.
Timothy Wheeler.
Aye.
And Tom Sanford, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Jay, is there any other, I know you're remotely remote. Is there any other mail or business or anything else that you have that's pressing?
I didn't really get any. I haven't been to the mailbox for a week or so, but
Okay.
usually I get emails, and the only thing I got was a reminder that we're supposed to use recycled paper and other recycled items. That was it. And then there was a email that went around noting that TGI Fridays is closed at the mall.
Yes.
Oops. What did I do with you? Oh, shoot.
Which is actually kind of relevant because we've been hoping for quite a long time to get a restaurant like that at Riverbridge, right?
Well, better than that.
Well, probably, I think the group it's in is fast casual, and I think that's what the Sennies were chasing.
Yes.
Leave. So I don't know whether did they close it and somebody else moved in, or is it vacant? Does anybody know?
They
that?
closed a whole bunch of their restaurants across the country
Yeah.
last
Like
week.
20 some odd in New England.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So maybe somebody else will pick it up. I don't know which business. I've only been there a few times. It's never been super crowded.
Right.
Yeah, the other stuff, I've been trying to keep working a little bit on the housing topic, so there's a little bit of news about that, which I think I had scheduled for 8. I was kind of hoping we had some timely administrative matters to deal with. Here's an administrative matter. We have no budget for anything, right? Except the
We got
master
a little
plan
bit.
update. It seems like on this housing, to do this housing job right, we're gonna need to become better educated on what the trade-offs are, how do we find or is there any point where the kind of housing that we want to build can be done and put on the market for the price that we would like to see it at? I think it seems to me like we need to learn more to be able to make that judgment, because it's so easy because we can't control pricing. It's just going to be too easy to get this launched and have it come out expensive, right? So if we were to do that, we may need a consultant or somebody to consulting group, or we could try to do it ourselves with the help of the developers and people we know, or we might decide we want to hire somebody who's already done it before and can give us some guidance. And if we were to do that, how would we get money for it? And is that even possible in less than a year?
So when we met with Victoria and Jane and Emily last time, they came away from that feeling as though they needed to address those issues related to infrastructure and cost of infrastructure and cost of, ways in which we could keep price down on some of these smaller units. And I believe they're going to approach that in this next quarter with some more in-depth study. And our suggestion to them that they, pull a forum together of developers that have built this type of housing, I think is they've taken that to heart. So I think we're going to see in this, and I'll know next week because the DLTA projects are due on, we have a committee meeting on Tuesday to decide on the first round. So that was my impression, was that we were going to see a furtherance of what they started in this last round, because they really came away from our conversation feeling like they didn't have answers to those harder questions. So I think, that's an opportunity for us to engage with them and really argue that, maybe one of the forums ought to even be held here in Berlin up in the 1870 and, pull together the towns that are interested and staff from Central Mass, as well as a bunch of developers that have been building that type of housing successfully already.
Okay. If it turned out that it required enough work that it wasn't really a volunteer project in its entirety, can they get money to hire a consultant?
Well, see, that's the thing. The DLTA funds, they might ask, I don't know how much, I can't remember how much we used in this first round, but there's the DLTA. What do we got this round? We got 275,000. Plus, I think we've got another 177,000 to help communities write federal grants in support of certain things. So, we could certainly go to them and say, if they didn't include it in a DLTA round this time, we could say, okay, well, we want to apply for a grant to do this sort of in-depth study that begins to look more seriously at the complexity of trying to build this type of housing particularly in rural communities. So help us get a grant, and they could administer it.
Yeah.
But
what would the timing be on that?
Well, they've been given this 177,000 and it can only be used. They've been given that money by the state and it can only be used to help communities write federal grants. But they want to jump right into it. I mean, I would imagine they'd work on that in February easily, start writing the grant proposal up.
And the team that's working on the cottage housing bylaw, did they have any money?
That's the group that I said was probably going to ask for more DLTA funding because they used DLTA funding for this last round that they worked with us on. So,
Okay.
and that's the group that wants to pull in people like Greenborough, whatever his name is, from Concord and some of those characters. So I think the commission's the way to go because they've got some money. We could pitch a little of our master plan money at it if they said, well, we'd really like to work with you, but if you had another $1,500 or something like that, it would help. I would think we could spare that probably. So I'll know more in a week about that. So the next time we meet, I should be able to update you as to what they've got on their agenda.
Yeah, and if they needed more DLT money, would they get that quickly, or is that got to be through some grant cycle or something?
Every year we get an allocation. So the 275,000 we got this year, we just signed the contract and we're going to look at proposals for the expenditure of probably the first half of that money next Tuesday. And they'll immediately start working on those projects. And from what they had said, they wanted to do another round of this cottage housing stuff.
Okay.
So I'll find out. Because you're right. I mean, there's some hard, tricky questions here that are stymieing us. We're really not confident that what we're trying to accomplish can be accomplished.
Well, we're kind of in a new environment too, where the cost of construction has just gone crazy, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, when you sent that piece from that Hudson site with 2,000 square foot homes that are going to sell for 850,000, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
craziness.
That's material to a large degree, right?
Half of it.
it's
Yeah.
both. I mean, because all the contractors their prices have gone up a lot.
Yeah.
Because there's been kind of a fewer of them and more opportunities than more jobs. Prices have gone up.
Right, and that's why they've made them 4-bedroom units also, so that they can get that bigger money.
Well, they're marketed as 2-bedroom units. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
They say
except
2
the
bedroom, 2
video
bath, and these are
had,
4 bedrooms.
right, had 4 bedrooms.
It's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Well, the other piece that the governor tries to push in her new housing agenda is that accessory dwelling units. And we have in-law apartments, accessory apartments that are attached, accessory apartments in detached structures, built before 1990. But maybe we need to look at that and see if accessory dwelling units on existing single-family lots of a size that's less than 1,000 square feet is something that we'd consider.
So you're putting 2 dwelling units on a single lot?
Yeah.
Right, I mean, that was certainly the category that garnered the most interest when we did that housing forum.
Yeah.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
Yeah,
If you said 1 bedroom 800 square feet, you know, maybe it's something to look at.
Well, California seems to have decided that's the solution to their problem.
I mean, one bedroom might very well be able to exist with, you know, the existing infrastructure. The well and the septic might very well accommodate
it.
the one additional bedroom.
Yeah.
And then you end up with that in-law or starter, you know, I mean, that newlywed couple lives in the backyard of their folks.
Right.
And then when the folks get old, they move into the little place and the kids move into the main house, you know, who knows?
Yeah,
What is
well, so the Conservation Commission has definitely had one application so far to put in a new septic to accommodate an additional bedroom in an accessory dwelling unit.
Huh?
Um,
So so there'd be a new septic replacing the original or
Correct.
two septics?
No,
New one.
a new one
Okay.
that would accommodate both buildings.
Yeah.
It was a detached building.
Did you approve it?
On condition that ZBA approved their application for an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah.
So is an accessory in an existing structure?
It was a separate building. I think they were calling it a garage.
Yep.
That they were going to renovate to become an accessory dwelling unit.
You know, we
They
allow
needed to
someone to take
upgrade.
a barn or part of their house and turn it into an accessory structure. I mean, Bombards did it. You know, there's 2 or 3 here in the neighborhood that ended up adding bedrooms, but the septic had to find a way to accommodate. But we've always said it had to be attached, you know, unless it was built before 1990. But maybe that's outdated attitude, you know, particularly with family size keep continuing to drop.
Would we limit it to parcels that were of a certain size? Or would you limit it to places that, in other words, like Central Village, you wouldn't want to have.
Yeah. No, I
places
think you're
down
right.
About Gates Pond, you wouldn't want to have, you know, some of those lots are kind of small.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
you might put a size on it, lot size.
Would you do a lot size or would you do a zone?
I guess I'd do a lot size because
Hmm.
Because
Then
that's
it-
really the concern.
Right.
Well, I guess it would seem to me that well and septic would control. I wouldn't necessarily think of a separate lot size requirement.
Hmm.
You know, I just think it's an issue that's already taken care of if you deal with the septic and the water on the property.
Mhm.
And you think that would be enough?
And you've got offsets to, you know, side yards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Would this apply to new construction, or only to existing homes?
No, I think it could be existing structures that wanted to add a small footprint accessory dwelling, as well as starting out fresh, you know.
So if you were to build a new single-family home, you would be able to also have an ADU on the same property?
I don't know, you know, it's worth looking at, probably.
Well, you had something similar to that tried up at on Autumn Ridge.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Autumn Ridge, yeah.
He connected it, right, with a breezeway or
Put a
whatever.
breezeway on it.
Yeah.
Huh.
To argue it was, you know, attached, but
Attached, right?
it was an in-law apartment, wasn't it?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And it had to meet that requirement of no greater than 35% or whatever the total floor area.
And it was like just barely.
Yeah.
Well, if we're considering this, well, I think it's a good idea. We should try to make it part of this whole project, anything like
Yeah,
we're talking about.
because this ADU issue is, I mean, the state's really, the governor wants to see that almost by right, I think.
Well, that's how it is in California. It's state mandate.
Well, see, that kills me because once again, they don't think anything beyond 128, I mean, they're talking municipalities that have existing sewer and water
Yep.
capable and be damned for everybody else. And it's like, come on, more than half of the state has issues with septic and wells.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you think about all the stuff like up in the North Shore and Salisbury area and the stuff down the Cape and everything else, they don't want any more. I mean, they're having a hard time now with the nitrogen load going into the oceans. They can't do that. I mean, just once again, an ill-conceived plan.
But that's, I haven't read the stuff, but that's what it seems like they're pushing, right?
I agree. From what I've heard on the radio and stuff, seems to be their initiative.
Really, it's the one size fits all
Mm-hmm.
solution.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for everybody.
Mhm.
No. Is there any more updates for the CMRPC or DTLA that we want to talk about, or?
Yeah, so Jane, I told Jane that we were supportive of a zoning diagnostic and perhaps include the subdivision control law. And she said it might be easier. She felt, given what she knows right now, the DLTA is going to be pretty competitive this time. So she said, well, why don't you settle for the diagnostic of the zoning, and then based on what they determine needs to be addressed, they'd then assist us in getting a one-stop grant or some other grant to come in and work on the subdivision control law at the same time they were working on the rewrites to the zoning bylaw. So they'd help us acquire the funds to do that second phase.
That makes sense.
And so what they need is a letter of support. So I'm going to draft something up that I'll send to you, and then you can sign it, and Kristen can sign one, and then we'll have accomplished that. We just
Okay.
need to do that before next week, so I'll send you something tomorrow probably.
Okay.
So that's all I know about that stuff. And we need to resubmit like we were talking, the over 55 piece that the Attorney General didn't accept because the town meeting wasn't properly posted or whatever. So we'll dig that up again too, and then we can vote on that.
Okay.
And get it submitted.
And there's nothing that we're gonna that we're anticipating changing in that, right? It's just gonna be exactly what it was.
Yeah, I don't think there was any reason to change anything.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, I'll make a motion that we'll resubmit that article to the select board for inclusion on the warrant.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? This is to go on the warrant for this annual town meeting.
Yeah,
Okay, seeing none, I will ask you to vote. Carolyn McDonald,
Aye.
Timothy Wheeler,
aye.
Jay Teach,
I
Thomas Andrew,
Aye.
and Tom Sanford, aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. One thing I want to mention just before we move on to the next topic and before it slips my mind is we need to do our report, annual report. Jay, is that something you can pull together from our fairly easy from the minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the due date?
Yesterday.
I
think
haven't,
end
I
of the
haven't
month, isn't
seen
it?
a due date, but it's usually
No,
the
it's-
end of, right? Usually by now they're like pounding on us. Don't forget, don't forget. But
Yeah,
it's
no.
usually the end of January.
January, yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna vote on CPA next week, because so we can get it in by the end of the month, yeah.
It's an everything late period in our lives. You notice when the tax bills came out?
Yeah, definitely.
Must be something to do with COVID.
I have a feeling that horse has left the barn.
I don't know, everybody's got it again.
That's what I hear.
I was
Yeah,
with
Janet just got over it, so,
Oh, did you let her out?
yeah, I've let her out. She's wandering around the house now.
He had her confined to an upstairs chamber.
Well, James was going to Japan, so we didn't want him to get it, so we locked her up. And it worked. He got away and he didn't get it, so.
Well, Liza got
just
it. She
bring it back.
just spent 4 hours with each of me and Caroline in very close quarters.
Uh,
Neither one of us got it. Go figure. In other news, I sent you all the info about schools, and if we want to talk about that, what is 8 o'clock?
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock, so we can.
Yeah, that was, I'd asked for some info on capacity and enrollment, and John did a really nice job talking about how you determine capacity, and there was a reference he had that I read that was really interesting, but enrollment is kind of going up and down, and the more I looked at it, I realized we need some help sorting that out. And I talked to Carol Costello, and I'm going to be talking to Megan, superintendent and chair of the school committee. And they were kind of not sure what to do with it. And then we talked about what our objective was for a while. We met at 19 Carter and talked for a while about what we're trying to accomplish. And they seem to be pretty enthusiastic about that. So I'll keep working on that. But trying to figure out, I think what we need to do is have an answer for how much space do we have in the schools if we're going to go propose a development that's going to add kids. And also an answer for, because it's so variable and hard to predict, an answer for what happens if it turns out, if there's a range and we end up on the high side of the range, what does that mean? Like, what do we do about that and what does it cost? I mean, if I was a voter, I would want to know that, right? Are we building a new school, putting a wing in the school, doing something with school choice? What are the options? And we might get enough answers from the school committee or the superintendent for that, or we might they may want to hire somebody to look at it. I don't really know.
So, Tom's got his hand up.
You're muted, Thomas.
And I didn't mean to put my hand up. Sorry.
Would you like me to lower it for you?
I'll put up my hand.
Yes, please.
So I thought the information was interesting. If we look at numbers like 20 years ago and we look at class size, I wonder if they've changed much. My recollection is that when the school opened, we were probably talking about 14 and 15 kids per class, in 2 classes per grade. And now we've got that one bubble in the 3rd grade where there's like the 22 number, but the others are like 15 and 16 and maybe. Well, anyway, it'd be interesting that the population of the town's grown by 1,000. in the last 20 years, right?
Yes.
So, and the school age population has grown by what percent? I mean, if we were at 2,500 2 decades ago and now we're at 3,500, you'd say, well, if the school age population was, 250, then it should be 350 now. And so that the dynamic has changed. So I'd want to look at that. The other interesting number was the threshold John said something about we're trying to keep the number of students from Berlin Memorial that go on to Tohoto at somewhere around 90. And I thought, that's interesting because I wonder, there was a time when Tohoto had more school choice kids than they had kids from Berlin. I don't know what that number is now, but I imagine there's still a number of school choice kids. So are we saying that Berlin needs to try not to grow its school age population because we don't want to send any more kids to Tohoto than 90, even though we have school choice kids at Tohoto that would interrupt the possibility of a Berlin kid going there? I mean, they're going to go, obviously, but what is, I was trying to figure out what that meant.
Well,
And then the other
also-
part is we should look at Eloise's census data and births. I think James has said birth numbers, they may be a year recently where there was a big bump. That may be related to COVID, just like, the blackout in the 60s, led to a hell of a lot of kids all of a sudden. But, so there's a bunch of different factors that would be fun to talk to the school committee and the superintendent about. Because if people get a handle on this,
Because there's also an issue of an increasing number of families are not sending their kids off to Tohoto, they're going somewhere else.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure is fully understood, but they don't know the BMS enrollment until late in the year.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
I mean, it seems like quite a challenge to try to manage your capacity when you've got such a big unknown about.
if you're a kid in Berlin and you have the chance to go to Assabet, you're not going to shy away from that. That we can point to a number of kids in town that have gone to Assabet that are happy as hell that they went there and are doing fine. And I think there's also this issue of, I think some people are questioning what they get out of a 4-year college education as opposed to pursuing some avenue to form a career around. And that has implications to the career path, the school path that kids take, I imagine, when it comes to going to a school like Tohoto or Neshoba or Algonquin as opposed to Assabet or Bay Path or Minuteman or any of those,
So think about our goal here with this SWS project. If we have to figure out what our target is maybe for adding kids to the schools, right? Even though you can't predict it exactly, you've got a little bit of control by the number of bedrooms that you build. And then we need to be able to answer good questions from people at town meeting around that, which it's going to be very hard for us to do that. I don't know whether we're going to get a commitment from the school committee or the superintendents to do that for us. Is asking a lot, but maybe they will. But again, maybe we need somebody outside who can do a report for us or something. And then
let's
one of the options is to expand the school. We need to get some kind of estimate on what that would cost. I'm not sure how we do that either.
So let's look at the litmus test of the possible we have in front of us, right? There's 34 units, right? And we're trying to do a mix of housing. So starter, senior, and workforce, right? So if a percentage of that senior, let's say it's a third, because we're just using threes, a third of that's going to be people that aren't going to have kids that possibly have kids that would go into the school system, right? So you're left with 2/3 of 34. Let's do the math nice and easy. We'll make it 20 households that are going to have possibility of putting students there. Now, if your bedroom sizes are limited, maybe 2 students out of each household. So you're talking 40 kids tops, right? That are going to just spread throughout all of the grade level. Right?
The
Actually,
problem is that
Yeah.
they don't,
It's
Lot of the-
not, it's not an even mix. I get what you're saying. You're gonna have little bubbles that.
yeah,
go
lots of
along.
times that first home that someone buys brings in a lot of younger
Right.
kids as opposed to upper grades. You know, they buy the house because they need it now, but they've got 2 kids that are just entering the school system.
Right.
I was just looking at new roads in town like Pollard and stuff. I'll go get that because you can look at. I think Eloise could help us probably. She might be able to tell us how many school age kids are on like Pollard. So you build 5 houses, but there's 7 kids, as opposed to, I mean, you build Riverbridge, you end up with 14.
Well, you know, it's a good reference point is the 2 co-housing
Yeah.
developments, because they're so similar to what we're doing.
Right.
And they did add a lot of kids to the schools, and we've got, I'm sure we have data.
But they've got 3 and 4 bedroom units.
Is that right? Yeah.
I mean, they got 2s, but they also got 3s and 4s. So it's a little different than what we were talking about originally with Ron's model of, cottage houses with 1 and 2
Well, but
bedroom.
Ron wasn't interested in what was the objective? Was it starter homes or workforce or senior?
Workforce.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
want a workforce,
Okay.
But they were small units.
small units, yeah. 1,000 feet, if that.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't going to accommodate a family of 4.
Not very comfortably.
I
And
mean,
Yeah.
not nowadays.
right.
Where we're staying here in Florida is a development that's a lot like what we're talking about. The houses are all 1,000 feet plus or minus a little bit.
Really?
Yeah. Relatively dense, but still not super dense. And there's a whole tract of them, like lots and lots and lots. And I've seen those before, and what often happens is people get in them and stay. And so there's a lot of kids for a while, and then eventually it becomes a lot of seniors.
They a mix of rental and ownership.
I think they're mostly owner occupied, but there's some Airbnbs, which is why we're there.
Huh.
I was gonna get some video of it, except it was raining. But as you drive down the road, I mean, they're all about that size, and they're all different, mostly ranches, right?
Mhm.
And they're all different. Some people have added on a little bit, but to a large degree, I think it's probably hasn't changed a lot since it was built.
How old?
I'm gonna guess like 60s or something. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
I don't have any info on that.
Hmm.
They don't look new. I mean, and the landscaping is all very mature. So they've been around for a while. But I was thinking, it's just a rectilinear grid, right, of houses, and I just wonder whether those same size of houses could be built in a better layout, so we get, the kind of pocket communities and open space and stuff that we'd like to have. I'm very curious what that adds to the cost, and no way to know that. one of the things that's interesting, there's a guy named Steve Durain, who he may be dialed in, I don't know.
He is.
Yeah, so he was involved in both Lincoln and Concord's housing developments over the years. And he's been working on a project recently and getting prices on 1,000 square feet. I think some commercial and residential, but he's saying the bids are coming in at $400 a square foot.
Hmm.
And the only solution he sees is manufactured homes, which can be quite a bit less than that.
Hmm.
And in fact, I think when Mark and Seth sent us their first round proposal, didn't he have he had a few homes that he had drawings of that I think he supplied with him, and those were, I think those were from a manufactured home company. Whether he was intending to buy them and just install them or build them to those plans, I don't know. But apparently there are some pretty big economies of scale building these things in a factory and assembling them on site instead of trying to do stick built. And it seems like right now that's the only way we might get to the goal, because at $400 a square foot, what we're talking about doing is pretty much impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he'd given me information about a company in Maine that does it, and I was looking at their website. It looked good, although actually both of these manufactured homes companies that I looked at are doing a lot more multifamily at this point in time for some reason,
Oh.
because they do both.
So prefab multifamilies?
Yeah.
Huh.
They get a big crane and they build them up.
You and your crane.
Big cranes, because they're building big units. Maybe Steve would tell us a little bit about that, since it's very current information. See if you can talk him into joining us, Carolyn.
Steve, if you'd like to join the conversation, if you want to raise your hand. Oh, we have a hand.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, guys. My name is Stephen Durain and Associated J's, and I was the governor's appointee with the Lincoln Housing Board from about 2011 to about 2015, and moved back to Concord 6 years ago, and I finished out the remainder of another person's bid on the Concord Housing Commission. A little bit different. And I do a lot of construction management in my life and put together a lot of projects. And what Jay's referring to is I've been working on a commercial venture in Wayland, and basically trying to get together, stay within budget for a community organization. And the pricing shocked me when I sent the plans out to bid with stick build. And so I went back to a trusted source in Maine that has bid out a number of projects for me over the last 15, 20 years. And I just got my bid back from them today, and they're roughly, well, they're less than half, but there's a responsibility of us being responsible for the foundation and the the electrical stanchion and the tie-in. They'll present an electrical panel, but we tie it in. There's a few other all the site work, obviously, And if there's any type of extensive porches or out, staircases coming up, it's always makes more sense. You can give them the specs and they'll try to build it, but I find that those types of things, because of, grade differential, it's always best to do them on site. But it is, it's remarkably, I'll give you a ballpark but, we're doing a little bit different project. It's under $200 a square foot.
Wow.
Whoa,
And,
man.
and we're looking at, and honestly, and it's a commercial-esque project. So there are certain things I'm doing, like this staircase treads have to be rubber, and there's certain dynamics that are a little bit different with commercial, like the bathrooms, et cetera. But I'm sure with a little bit of pencil sharpening, you can work a little bit better number. And also you guys would be getting economy of scale. And they do have a tremendous, and they're not the only ones. Obviously, there's a lot of different companies out there who are doing it. I was surprised when they told me that most of their projects these days, as per unit, are multi-family, or multi-unit, and a high contingency of commercial as well. So I was a little bit surprised at that. I've given Jay a lot of the information, and if you need anything else, I'd be happy to furnish Jay with all that in the future. If you have any questions. There's a few things we do, like my background, structural engineering. So we shifted the plan. Originally, it was a 35 by 35 foundation. It's an old turn of the century, 4-square colonial with hip roofs. And so we shifted it to 32 because, and I put a center structural line down the middle because it's easier for them to transport between 14 feet and 16 feet wide. So if you're mindful of those dynamics, which seem to work out well with a house, most bedrooms are going to be less than 14 feet. It can work out very well. So those are the only real stipulations, and they can be extremely efficient. I had first heard about them when, and this is the third evolution of this company, but at one point they were called Net Zero Designs, and I was reading about it in Fine Home Building, or they had an advertisement back in the days when there were advertisements, and I that weren't online, and I went and I called them up, and I was working on a project in Lincoln where I was looking to build one of the first net zero houses in Lincoln at the time, and they were able to produce one without many of the headaches, and they were very advanced as well. So they have that component as well that's very attractive to me in my particular interest. I'm currently a member of the C-Free group in Lincoln, which is called Carbon Free Residential and Everything Electric. So a lot of our focus is trying to educate people towards the benefits of all electric, getting away from fossil fuels, all that stuff, which I would hopefully give you guys influence to go the heat pump route in this and get away from the fossil fuels. So, but I'm sorry, any questions?
So can you give us your view on Riverwalk as you spent time in Concord? We've looked at that and thought, we're sort of fascinated by the size and the layout and stuff, but is it viewed positively in Concord?
I think there's a small percentage of people in Concord who are aware of everything going on in the town at a very high percentage. And I think for those people, I think it's almost completely positive. I don't see, I think there's a larger percentage that are just hear about it through little bits and pieces that come across in the Concord Bridge, or, when they hear about some of the contractor pricing, but ultimately there's no question about it. The reaction has been very positive.
Now, Jay shared with us a project that Toll Brothers are doing in Hudson, which is, I guess, what were they, about 2,000 square feet, Jay? But
1,700 to 2,000, yeah.
Yeah, so they're a little bigger than the footprint we were talking about, but they were all coming in at 850.
That was a sell price.
Yeah, and that, what you're talking about with this outfit in Maine suggests that there may be a way to lower that part of the cost. Then what we're faced with here without water and sewage is how to cluster units and manage the water supply and the septic issues at a reasonable cost. In Wayland, you've got public water and sewage.
In Wayland, you have public water and septic,
Yeah.
and some well, but some water. That's depends on location.
What's your sense? Can you tell us how much easier it is to build in an environment where you have those services? Is it lower the cost enough that units can come in at a lower bottom line, or is that not possible?
Are you talking because of the presence of water and sewer?
Yeah.
Versus adding it?
Yeah.
Well, I think it depends on how you do it. There's some of the larger group dynamics you can have, I think, up to 90 units off of one type of septic system. That's probably the most efficient. After 90, I think there's a state law that disallows that type of grouping, but there's a lot of, for example, in Lincoln, I think every single condominium development there, and I can think of 4 off the top of my head, they're all based on group septic. And, that has a certain maintenance, a little bit more, there's a little bit more pumping out than your typical system yourself. Rather than every 3 years, it's probably, I think, once or twice a year. But I think there's that efficiency can't be beat, in the long term as far as cost goes. But for the development costs, it's a little bit higher than just tying into, sewer in town. But
right.
Sometimes there's a like in Concord, for developers, there would be a cost for tying into the sewer system, and it would be a per unit cost. So, and let's say it's back in the old days, maybe $700 or $800. Maybe now it's probably 14, 15, something like that. But when you look at that and you start calculating that, how many units are you talking about, 20 or 30? That gives you a pretty good budget to put in an autonomous system that I think you'll be able to pass on a certain amount of, studies have shown that the homeowner will pay less over 30 years with the septic system versus with the town system for sewer and water, especially the way things are going these days.
Carolyn, is Mark in the audience? I was curious whether what he was planning was manufactured homes or not.
He is. Mr. Rhodes, do you want to join the conversation? Yep. Mark,
Yep.
here, there you go.
Yep. I'm not a huge fan of manufactured homes, and I think the cost is being diluted by no site work and no foundation. We could stick build for $200 a square foot if we didn't have to do foundations and site work. So I think that's I don't really back that statement. And in the state, you can't have more than 90 bedrooms on a septic. That's not 90 units. You can't have more than 90 bedrooms.
Sorry, that's right. It's 90 bedrooms.
Yeah. So those are just some of the facts that are out there. And we're proposing multiple types of units. So try to manufacture those at a smaller scale. If you have 10 of one, 10 of the other, and 10 of the other, you're not gonna get the discount that you're looking for, and also you're not gonna get the quality. I wouldn't be interested in doing anything with manufactured anything. And then the other question is this job in Wayland, provided they're getting these units built for $200 a square foot, what's the end price? What are they selling them for? Is there, is it foolish for the board to try and cut costs and quality if the end price doesn't change?
So if you're asking about the Wayland project, it's for it's not a community project. It's not being done through the town of Wayland. It's done through one of the organizations in town. And it's their way to reduce costs after going out to an entire bid process with the same set of plans to 5 or 6 different traditional local developers, and then taking the same set of plans up to the prefab.
Sure.
You can build for $200 a square foot in today's prices, Mark?
Yeah, if you eliminate the foundation and the site work
Yeah.
and the tie-ins and the services and everything else that you have to do, sure. You're gauging Wayland pricing against Concord. If you go into Wayland and call people up for a bid, you're going to get a different number than you are in Berlin. And if you go out to, Townsend or Ashby or Southern New Hampshire, you're going to get a different number there too.
Yeah, you take the zip code, you multiply by 3 and divide by 27.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There is something to be said, you go into Boston and everything costs even more, but the guy's got to spend 3-4 hours of his day driving. So that is what it is as far as that's concerned.
So the drawings that you gave us way back when for a couple different models of houses, were those plans that you would buy, or were those manufactured homes?
No, I just pulled up the plans online to show an example of 1,000 to 1,200 square foot ranch.
Okay.
And those things could be built in a day.
Uh-huh.
Roof and
Hey.
windows in 2.
Write that down, Mark.
You could get-
You can build a house in a day.
The houses down at South Street on Wilson, those houses are frame complete inside of a day and a half. With a roof the following day, windows in another day. It's 2,200 square feet, 2.5 days.
Well, but I think when you buy these manufactured things, they're finished inside too, which is where a lot
Oh,
of
I got you. Yeah,
I think they're wired and plumbed and windows.
Yeah.
And everything.
yeah. I don't know. I've never met anybody who lived in a manufactured home that was happy with it.
Well, I
But
think times have changed. These guys,
Yeah.
have got designs that they've built over and over so they get the bugs out of them, and they
yeah,
have, big equipment doing a lot of the manufacturing, so things come out the same every time. And I'm not sure that's still true,
Oh.
But I don't know. I think, we should at least look at it. Hear from some of these guys what they can do.
If I could add, the town of Concord sponsored there was a development right across the street from the Rowe birthplace on Virginia Road. And this is a project done about 23 years ago. It was run by a fellow by the name of Jim Craig. And I was assistant to him at the time. And there were 12 units that were all prefab. And it's been 20 some odd years, and they've been pretty much a tremendous success. I've been in them myself, and I was surprised how square. I've heard stories from a lot of builders I know that said that the levels didn't come in outright. The top of the wall, you have to be very precise with foundations with them, which is absolutely true. Everything needs to be spot on. People have to be on the same page. But as Jay said, I think, and I'm not this is your project. I'm just trying to share some experience, but I've had pretty good experiences with the build quality at the end of the day. I'm sorry, my memory is blank. I can't think of the name of the project, but it's right on Virginia Road, Stone Mill Terrace or something like that. But it's been a great project.
I do have an unrelated question for Stephen if we're done with our conversation. Just very quickly.
Right.
Go ahead.
Stephen, do you know Scott Rodman?
I know Scott very well. He's the
As-
Trojan
as-
force.
Indeed, indeed. We're doing all the smart home work over there.
Wow. So Scott and I are planning a project. We've been talking about it for a while in the future that incorporates a lot of these dynamics. Green homes, net zero. This actually is we have a couple of different projects planned for the future of multi-unit. I won't say retirement, but I'll say over 55. But he's something else. He's really like that guy is, man. When he goes deep, he goes deep. He goes deep dives. I get
Indeed, he does.
I get a lot of great information from him. We talked a couple of days ago. He's great. He's something else. He's fantastic.
Yeah. When he told me he wants to know how much energy his toaster's using, I realized the level of intensity.
I can tell you what the meter is that you can put on your panel, and you can determine the exact same how many watts of for your toaster. I like my toast dark, so it's
Yeah. Oh, you energy waster, you.
I'll have to get an extra solar panel to offset my predilections.
We're not going to end up having to have toasters that have got heat pumps in them, are we? With refrigerant and pumps and all that stuff. I hope not.
No full resistance toasters.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That's funny.
Well,
He told me he had a smart. He did tell me he had a smart toaster oven. Did he tell you that?
No,
Yeah, I didn't even know such a thing existed. Anyway, don't mean to.
me either.
Don't mean to dilute this, but he's part of that C3 group as well. He's a welcome addition.
Yeah, I figured if you were involved with Net Zero in Lincoln that you knew him.
Right.
So
Tell
what
him
is
tell him you met Carolyn from GDK Surround.
I will indeed.
Yes.
so Steve? Approximately what does net zero add to the cost of a home? Because you got to put solar panels on it, right? And you got to use heat pumps instead of a cheap gas furnace, and et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some feeling for how much that adds to the cost?
It's funny. I've seen some numbers. There's money up front versus long term, obviously.
Mhm.
I've done a number of homes recently calculating solar panels, for example, and I think that's your best cost return. I'm working with this 6,000 square foot house in Lincoln, and 20-year payback for 57 panels, which is about 22 kilowatts, is over $150,000 in savings, because you're off the grid immediately, and you're feeding not just off the grid, you're feeding back the grid. Scott Rodman is a big proponent to try to increase the amount of kilowatts that you can feed back the grid. Just a side note, but so that's the upfront, Jay. It's unfortunately it's for people who can afford to do it. There's a lot more financing options for people, and they, to me, I've been doing this work for a long time, but I don't know if you guys remember back in the 90s, there were a lot of these so-called ESCOs around, energy savings companies, and they would come in and they would help you to find ways, if you were running big commercial buildings, they'd find ways to reduce costs, and then they would front the money, and then there would be receiving the savings back. And
By the credits.
yeah, exactly. So anyway, I don't have it up front for you, Jay, but it's definitely worth looking into. I think the heating systems are becoming much more level, heat pumps versus furnaces. Even a hot water heat pump when I first installed mine 5 years ago, it was $3,000. And now you can get a similar technology for about maybe $2,200. And they last longer than conventional. So, and the cost is probably, my calculations were I was saving $45 a month on just switching over that one appliance. But keep in mind, I had three teenage girls at the time, so I have to disclose that because one of them took 30-minute showers. So, but very good question, Jay. I'll work on it. I'll get back to you on that.
All good information.
Okay. Any more questions for me, or I'll disappear back into the woodwork? Otherwise, I don't even know if I'm on camera. I've just kind of come in from bringing in the firewood so much.
Yeah. Just your voice.
Very good.
No, much appreciated though.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen.
My pleasure, guys. Anytime, just holler out to Jay, and more than happy to come in, meet you face to face, and whatever, I'll come in with Scott, and we'll condemn your bread.
Absolutely.
Very good. Nice to meet you all. Take care.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments?
I think it'd be good
Oh,
if we
that
could.
was interesting. Other resource.
Yeah, a bunch of questions and decisions together somehow next few weeks that we could kind of chip away at, like we were doing with the signs. I haven't really done any work on it at all over the holidays. Well, not much.
Jay, can you get a little closer to your computer?
Oh, sorry. Where's my microphone? Okay. Yeah, I think in order
There you
to keep this project going forward, we're going to have to kind of narrow it down to a bunch of questions that we want to get answered and figured out how we get the answers for them and decisions that we need to make.
Agreed.
Yep.
So I was thinking of doing that by now, but of course I ran out of time. So
You had to go where it's warm.
Yes. So I don't have anything else for tonight.
Wow.
My face is really getting kind of stiff from not moving this whole time.
Yeah, well, you know how we feel.
Oh, there's an audience member, Michael Harding, has his hand up.
Okay, can you promote Michael, please? Hello,
Hi,
Michael.
it's Karen Brown and Michael Harding. I think that, given the discussion tonight, it's fairly disappointing for the neighborhood. We don't see the reason why the planning board is so quick to put something in that land across the street in the sand pit. And it comes across on all of these calls that the town would like some tax revenue, and so we might as well stick something else down at South Berlin. We've had the mall development, we've had the Rotary development, we've had a hotel, we've had Rockwell hotel apartments go in. And while I think that Mark Rhodes has got his heart in the right place and Steve has got his heart in the right place, it still doesn't fit with Berlin. We talk about 2% tax to preserve the community, preserve land. We talk about the look, the feel, the bucolic component of Berlin. But yet, when it comes to these projects, it all seems to just go out the window so that something can go in and something can get done. There's been a lot in South Berlin. I've been here over 30 years. That has been in South Berlin and not the rest of the town. So I ask you as a planning board, and I know you're all volunteers, to sit tight, find the really right project. If it's true that this is really the last parcel in town, make it count. Don't just put something in to put something in.
Karen, what would you like to, what would you like to see in there? I mean, I don't think we've ever discussed tax revenue since we started this project. I think it started with the housing surveys leading us to what we felt that voters and you know, members of our community wanted. So that's really been the motivation. But it's a piece of property that is likely to get developed sooner or later. And it's been sitting for a long time and it's likely to be an industrial use if we don't change the zoning, which you might not like. So what would you like to see there? Would you like to see a smaller number of large single families? Would you, you know, what have you guys talked about what it is that you would like to see there?
Yeah, we've endured a lot as a neighborhood. I think I brought up recently to another planning board member the recent tragedy that happened over the holidays with all of us, with our guests and families, and a loudspeaker in our backyard telling us about keeping away from buses when we as the butters were never even notified that there was a bus component going into our backyards. You know, there's just too many things that go on that it feels too much like it's not in my backyard, put it down in South Berlin. And the way that this comes across to the neighborhood is just shove it in South Berlin. We've done a survey and everybody wants this, so just shove it down there. But in reality, it is a nice property. It does have a lot going on. The town does have this 2% conservation component to it. How long does it take to buy it? Or why wouldn't the town take some of the other homes that are lower cost, maybe in the sweet zone of what people can afford, and buy those properties and put homes in that will increase or help our tax revenue and our tax base? There are a lot of homes that are under the spot or the price that we're currently talking about that you can buy one by one and give them to people who are in need or retirees or young couples. And put something that is in that land that will do more benefit to the town in terms of keeping the schools at a level where they're not crowded for kids, not increasing problems with police. You know, there are different things that can be done, but we have to think outside the box.
Tom, if I could just say a couple things.
Sure.
First of all, as someone who literally can see the back of Cabela's from her bed, I personally would never say, oh, just stick it somewhere, it doesn't matter. I very much understand how much it matters. Secondly, what the planning board has been trying to do with our cottage housing bylaw has kind of become entwined with this project. The cottage housing bylaw, when we started talking about it, was never intended specifically for this project. It was more a way to try to get smaller homes built in Berlin. The fact that Mr. Rhodes heard that we were working on this and has come in at the same time that we're talking about it. The two have gotten intertwined. So I just kind of wanted to clarify a couple of those things for you.
I appreciate it. I've had Sears in my backyard for longer than you've had Cabela's in your backyard.
Yep.
But I've also had Rockwell, I've had gas stations, I've had hotels.
Yep. My point is
You know,
more
no,
that
there's a point to this, Carolyn, and I know where you are in the Conservation Committee, but you know, when you look at what is going on and through your last several planning board meetings, you all talk about this is the last piece of land. Think more strategically about it. We as a neighborhood live with all of these various things, Target, Marlboro, Berlin, Mall, buses. We live with it all the time. It would be very nice if it is the last piece of land, as people say, but yet we see homes going up in other parts of Berlin that are in excess of 700,000 to create something special. Whether it's a park, whether it's preservation of land, whether it's other homes that can go in there that Mark, for example, could put in at a higher price. But think outside of the box. You do have other homes in town that are lower cost than 700,000 that the town could maybe acquire and buy them and give them to people who are in need or people who are new or who are retirees. There are other ways around this. Some of these things that are discussed tonight, you know, they feel the same as when I've been approached by other board members saying, gee, I don't know how we start with one thing that looks good and we end up with something completely different. This is how it changes right here and now. Different proposals coming in that are completely different from what we originally talked about, what the original goal was.
Anybody else have any comments or anything they would like to add? No? Okay, Karen, thank you for sharing that with us. We'll take it into consideration and we'll continue our discussions and chat about this. It's not something that we're trying to force on it. I don't think it's anybody's intention to stick everything in South Berlin and make the residents of South Berlin endure development, and we just don't want it anywhere but. So it has to go someplace and we stick it down there. I don't think that's our intent of this board at all.
One of the
Mr. Wheeler?
One of the things that Karen has mentioned, though, I think the board needs to pursue, and that's the fact that the bus company has evidently installed some sort of vandal protection equipment down there that's every time somebody moves near a bus, and there's, of course, over 100 buses there now, the speaker comes on, from what Karen has said, and makes quite an announcement about police being called and, you know, you're not allowed here and that sort of thing. And if it is echoing through the valley there, I think that I need to ask the building inspector to check in, because it certainly wasn't, well, we've got this issue with buses anyway. And I guess we need to pursue that again, because there was a point where Molly tried to collect excise tax on the buses that were stored there. And the bus company said, well, we're just going to pull all the buses out. But as Karen knows, there's more buses there now than there were back when Molly was first trying to go after them for assessed, the excise tax. I don't know what the town collects on excise tax for those units. The bus company was saying, well, we can't keep track of what unit is where and all that sort of baloney. So I'd be perfectly willing, if you want, to see the building inspector and ask some more questions and check in with the assessors and ask some questions there as well about whether we're collecting.
Yes, if you could. And also, can you figure out or have somebody, we've asked this question before, and I don't know as if we got a straight answer. on how they wound up getting placed there in the first place.
First place, right? Yeah.
Because our board was not aware of it. And I don't know if any other boards were aware of it. And all of a sudden they showed up.
Yeah, and this was way back. Well, there was a period where Diane, when she was assessor, became aware of it, and she went after them and started collecting excise tax. But then they disappeared for a while because I think they probably decided they didn't want to pay that. And then they snuck in again, and now they've expanded significantly. And now with this latest escapade with all this noise, there's that noise pollution factor as well. So yeah, I can go see the assessors and the building inspector.
Okay, thank you.
They've got to be paying excise tax somewhere.
Hudson. That's my bet.
And Hudson can't be less expensive than Berlin to house.
Why would Hudson even have anything to do with it? They're not, it's not on
The
Hudson
bus,
land.
the bus company that owns them is right there on River Road in Hudson, off Fox Road.
Right? But the parcel that they sit on is not in Hudson.
But what they did initially when Molly went after them was they said, okay, we're going to pull all the buses back to Hudson.
Fine. go ahead.
Okay, bye-bye.
And then
We'll
the
help you
mall
move 'em.
folks, then Liz at the mall said, oh, what are you doing? We're trying to stay afloat here and you're taking away our source of revenue. So
So show me in the development agreement for the mall.
Where it says
we
you
can
can
park the
have that-
buses there.
right, that
Right.
that use, that the parking lot is
Not a use.
right. So it's time to revisit that.
Yes.
So I'll report back.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else?
Well, the other thing is that, Karen, I don't think anybody on the planning board has ever said this is the last piece of land in Berlin that can be developed. I think Mark may have said it in regard to his possible potential sites that are available for the types of uses he's thinking about, but the planning board certainly doesn't look at any, I mean, there's lots of parcels that are still in danger, I guess a lot of us would say, as a result of being open and potentially available at some point. So,
And this process is ongoing, and whatever happens down there has to go before the town. Town has to vote on it. It's a high bar. It's a 2/3 majority at an open town meeting to have an overlay put over the top of that. Because right now, by right, you couldn't do housing in that parcel.
Thanks, but I've been here 30 years. I know how the overlay goes and the votes go at 2/3 majority.
well,
Thirds of the town lives north
Aaron,
of River Road.
Aaron, you witnessed it 3 years ago when the planning board didn't support the project from Vinacosa and it got turned down. So, you know, the question is right now, the ticking time bomb is that's limited business. If a use came in that was a limited business use and they wanted to build there, they don't need rezoning. They just need site plan approval and potentially a special permit, although they might very well be able to come in as a use that's allowed by right if it was the appropriate use that's already defined in that zone. So I think our assumption was that there might be an interest on the part of the town to see that parcel zoned for more of a residential use rather than a business use. But if that's not the case, then the neighborhood needs to make that clear to us.
And we can do that. I think that, you know, while we appreciate it, as I said, everybody's a volunteer and everybody's trying to do the right thing. It has been a long and grueling 30 years. And while you look at the Vinacosa component as being something that got turned down, it did move and it was highly successful in another part of town. It wasn't because
Well,
neighborhood-
that's a whole different, the way that happened was a very different thing. That was an already permitted project that was permitted to somebody else that he then purchased as a permitted project.
And I don't
That
think
happened under the radar of a lot of people.
Right, and I don't think that the board would argue that it was a successful project either, by any means.
Well,
I
we're
certainly
probably splitting
wouldn't.
hairs, but I think what we're talking about is, it is a nice parcel of land on River Road, and we could do something very strategic with it. So if the neighborhood needs to have a one-on-one meeting with the planning board, we'll all come to the table so that we can have a one-on-one meeting and make it something meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, I'd appreciate hearing from what the neighborhood, I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
if
I was
they-
gonna say I'd welcome that.
if they don't want us to think about changing that from limited business to a residential use, we need to hear that.
No, I don't think that's what I'm saying. I'm saying when we're at these and we are hearing different proposals and different components, we're expressing where we were, where we have come, and how it changes and why we think the changes are not beneficial. Going to residential is fine. It seems to be that the planning board has in their mind, it can only be X.
No, not at all.
Okay,
I don't, that none of us, I think, have come to the conclusion that there's a project that fits in that site
No,
that we envision right now.
I think that's right, and I don't think any of us are in any massive hurry to see something happening. The concern is, as people have said, that right now the door is open for a more intensive use, and we are concerned about that. But that would, for me, be the thing that would drive any sense of urgency on this, not a particular project proposal.
okay, thanks, Tom. Then I think that, if the planning board is open and willing to look at other components of what can go in there, then we should, plan a date when we can get together with the neighborhood and have a solid conversation about what the thoughts are from the various abutters and neighbors along River Road.
That would be great.
2 weeks. Be more than happy to have you.
Yeah, what time, 8 o'clock?
Yep, 8 o'clock's good. Did we put you guys in, Karen? Or you want to think about it?
Well, I don't know what everyone else's commitments in the neighborhood is for 2 weeks, so I have to come back to you on that.
Okay. The deadline for the agenda is kind of noon on Friday, so once you make a decision, let me know.
I'd like to, as I
And
mentioned.
that's noon a week from Friday, right?
Okay,
Okay, yeah.
but what's
Yeah.
the actual date? Because I'm on a business trip. I'm actually dialing in the middle of a meeting I'm in to join this. So I need to know what date, noon on Friday. We're talking this Friday, next Friday?
Well, we meet on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month.
So
And
the next
Friday
planning
we-
board,
Yep.
the next planning board meeting is January 23rd, so noon of January 19th
Yeah,
is when, so it's about a week and a half to see if that would work.
I would probably commit to something in February so that I have an opportunity to talk to the neighbors. I've gotten, a lot of feedback from them, but if we want to come out in force, I'll have to schedule people's time and etc. so that we can do that.
Okay. You have the date for February, Carolyn, at your fingertips?
February 13th and February 27th are our two meetings.
I would aim for the 27th and maybe hope for the 13th.
Okay.
So then the Friday prior to each of those dates is when we would need to know to put it on the agenda.
Sure.
All right.
All righty.
Karen, you all set to be put back in the audience?
I am. Thanks, Carolyn.
All right. Good night.
Anybody have anything else?
I do not.
Any audience member have anything they want to comment on?
We're down to Karen and Eloise.
Okay. Anybody, so at this point, we'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second,
There's no discussion, so we just have to vote.
All right, there you go.
Carolyn McDonald,
aye.
Timothy Wheeler,
Aye.
Thomas Andrew,
Aye.
Jay Teach,
Aye.
Tom Sanford, aye. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you all.